I'll see you in about an hour.
All right, Mr. Chair, we are good to go.
Thank you, Rob. Welcome, everybody, on a Friday afternoon, sunshine, to our Affordable Housing Task Force. We'll get right into it because some of us are very busy. I'll call the meeting to order. You can declare interest anytime you wish during the meeting. We'll start right into the reports. Welcome, Mr. Warden. We'll start with report PDR AF 0922, and I believe who is going to start this meeting? Is it going to be Liz or is it Liz?
Liz will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Liz. Go ahead, Liz.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So wasting no time, jump right in. And that's great because I'm actually quite excited to share with you the progress that we've made so far with respect to the surplus lands for affordable housing project. So I will, my thought for how to share this information is I'd like to do just a very brief walkthrough of the staff report that was provided to the task force. And then I also have a short slideshow presentation that will put up once we're finished that initial walkthrough, and we can do a little bit of brainstorming, and I can show you some of the cool ideas that are out there by other counties and regional municipalities on how they're communicating around their affordable housing needs and their programs as well. So diving right into the report. So this is an update provided further to the initial project scope and plan, I guess, that was presented to the task force in March. And we've been working away at the various list of activities that we had outlined to the task force at that time. I've separated out our progress into those 4 workflows that we had identified initially as well. So if you are referring back to that initial report, you should be able to follow along exactly how things are progressing in each of those workflow areas. So the first workflow is internal communications, and that's really just a focus and a reminder, top of mind consideration that we have an ongoing path of communication between us, so between staff and the task force, to talk about how we're progressing. This is our first update report, but we do intend that we'll come back with additional update reports as we go and as we have further progress to share. The second workflow is project hosting and messaging. And so that included a number of different specific tasks. In particular, it addresses kind of that data gathering, number crunching, and landscape review activities so that we're orienting our approach in a way that kind of fits within what we know already and allows us to kind of garner that information that we need to make good decisions around affordable housing creation. So our data gathering is underway. Our planning data analysis coordinator has started an update to some of the waitlist statistics. So looking in again to that demographic information and what our current status of the waitlist looks like for housing. We've also submitted a custom data order report to Statistics Canada. So when they release the updated census information around household incomes later in July, we will then be able to get our custom data order from them, breaking that down into decile information, which will help us to calculate our updated affordability thresholds. And as you may recall, the provincial policy statement outlines 2 different ways that we can define affordable. And so I think having those household incomes will be an important step for us in updating those affordability thresholds, because certainly we've been taking a close look at what the rental availability is currently and trying to get an idea of what those price points are and how they relate back to that average market rent that those the other way of calculating affordability is based upon. And what we're finding just I'll give you a couple of brief stats with that. Is we're finding, like, if we were to look at the average market rent from October 2021 provided through the CMHC portal, we're looking at an average market rent of around $980 in Mayford, or $1,015 in Owen Sound. So in and around that $1,000 mark. Looking at the listings that we've taken snapshot views of in March and in May of this year for the same 2-bedroom unit, so comparing apples to apples, the listings reflect an average price of around $1,600 to $1,700 a month. So, if we're looking at affordable being at or below market rent, we're talking about $700 a month compared to the listings that are coming in $1,000 greater than that, in around that $1,700 mark. And if we look across all unit types, kind of an average over 71 different listings that we reviewed, that would be in and around the range of $1,900 a month for a rental unit. And I would say about 86% of the listings indicate that one or more utilities would be in addition to that base rent price. So I think those income statistics are really going to help us narrow down what is that affordable threshold for our community, not reflecting those existing units, but more looking at that availability for mobility and move-in purposes. What's out there, what can people actually access in terms of new units. Okay, so in addition to the data work that we've been doing, we've also started having some conversations with Rob and Olivia in the communications team. And they'll be pulling together and helping us pull together a communications and tactics plan for rolling out messaging around affordable housing creation. One of the things that we've been talking about there is just trying to kind of nail in on how we want to present that information. And so there are a number of different examples across different municipalities, different counties, how they've decided to approach it. And so when we're finished the walkthrough of the report, I will share some of those and we can have a bit of discussion around really what might stand out for us in our approach as we move forward. And then finally, I'll just note under that workflow, we did get some feedback through some of the communications we've had with the local municipalities around the GIS mapping and screening tool that we've been working on for affordable housing as well. And so we'll continue to make those refinements based on the feedback that we've been provided with. Okay. The third workflow is better practices in process mapping. And that, I would say, has probably been where I've spent the majority of my time this past while. And so that really was looking at, I guess, the mechanism by which we might actually leverage these lands for housing. And I think there's two primary components of that. The first is the process. So how do you get lands from being surplus municipal lands to available for affordable housing creation? And it's a very, we've used a typical process, I guess, to try and kind of nail down the specific steps along that. I think we're hoping that we'll be able to refine that as we go and are proposing that, we're perhaps at the stage shortly here where we could look at a few pilot sites to start putting them through that assessment for process and determining, does that line up to the real world in terms of the steps that we would need to follow, and just really kind of, I guess, truthing that process that we've established so far. The other component, in addition to the process, is the suitability or site screening types of resources. And so that I've pulled together a draft table there. And what I've done is I've done a deep dive review of the major granting opportunities that are available for affordable housing right now. So through the CMHC Co-Investment Fund and the Green Municipal Fund program as well. And I've incorporated each of the eligibility criteria into that screening checklist that I've been putting together. So Not only from a desirability standpoint will we be screening properties, but also from a grant eligibility standpoint. Because as we know, in the market, the land costs that we're looking at and the construction costs that we're looking at, we're going to need to be stacking incentives together in order to make that work. And so a viable site isn't just a site that could in theory house an affordable housing project, but it also facilitates those granting opportunities to be stacked as well. So we have been continuing to work with the lower tier municipalities as they've been working through establishing community improvement plans. The majority now do have plans in place. 7 of 9 lower tiers have those in place, with the other 2 working towards that goal. I think that is a key tool that we will need in terms of rolling out the use of surplus lands for affordable housing, because it does create or afford, I guess, the ability to deal with those lands at or below market rate for affordable housing, and that would be otherwise prohibited under the Municipal Act. So it really does, it's a very functional tool to get that in place so that we do have the option of dealing with those surplus lands in that manner in the future. Okay. What I would say is I think just having carried out this work and integrated quite a large amount of information together, it's a very detailed and complicated process. And so I think you know, that opportunity to really nail in on a couple of pilot sites will help us start to flush that out further. You know, the screening and process maps are in draft format right now, and I'm still working away and refining them as I work my way through additional reports and strategies that have been shared with me around affordable housing creation. It's my intention to bring forward those checklists, screening tables, and process map to the task force at a next update. And at that point in time, I think you'll also appreciate that it's detailed and complicated, but I'm really hoping that we'll be able to streamline that as much as possible so that we have a really good framework that, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel every time we want to look at a property, that we have, you know, a good framework to go through assessing what might work and what might not, and sharing that information with our community partners as well, so that as they're considering their own properties, potentially for a partnership for affordable housing creation, they can have a sense of how those grant eligibility and site characteristics and project characteristics all dovetail together to result in a project that will be viable. The fourth workflow and the final one that I outlined in the report was around municipal liaison. And so we have had a couple of project roundtables with staff from the planning departments of the various lower tier municipalities. Those were a lot of fun, actually, having an opportunity to kind of talk about this issue outside of the normal day-to-day kind of application-focused environment. And I think there was very much, I guess, a consensus around that table that creation of affordable housing is a top of mind issue for all of the local municipalities. And I think in those conversations, there is a very good understanding amongst the planning staff that, you know, there really isn't one silver bullet solution that's going to solve this issue for us. It's going to be each municipality, each group, each partner, making the changes within their individual spheres of influence that they can, and trying to work collaboratively where possible to try and, you know, combine resources and know-how and really kind of guide each other through that process. I do think also for this particular project, there was support expressed by staff at the municipal levels. Though I think in the conversation with staff, it seems that the various municipalities are perhaps in different states of readiness and have varying capacities. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone on the task force that the municipalities are very, very busy right now with applications. And certainly, I think a number of places have seen staff changeover as well. And the pandemic and all of those considerations make it perhaps difficult to engage in a project with a scope that could be big, like this one. But I think there is the general willingness to try to participate in whatever their capacity may allow. And I think in looking at this project strategically, I think we will be well served if we can try and really focus in on how we might help supplement and facilitate the participation of the lower tiers. And that may mean that, you know, maybe county staff take on a little bit of additional legwork in doing some screening, and the municipalities, you know, participate with the surplusing process or what have you. And I think we'll have to define that relationship, and it'll be a little different for each of the various municipalities that we may partner with. So I think that is kind of the brief run through of the report, and certainly there is additional detail in the report, so I encourage you to take a look, and do feel free to share if there are other community partners that you're working with that might have an interest in the project. And then I guess maybe what I'll do, I don't know, perhaps we could, if there are questions on the report, that might be a good time now, and then to pull up the PowerPoint presentation for some discussion afterwards, if that works for you.
Thank you, Liz. There's one thing I should have done before we started. I should have read the motion to put on the floor. So let's do that. Then can you give your report again? And then we can
Rewind.
All right. I'm going to read this motion, which I should have read before, to put it on the floor. Addendum to report PDRAF 0922 regarding the status update on the use of surplus lands for affordable housing be received, and that regular updates continue to be provided back to Affordable Housing Task Force. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Brian, second by Shirley. Now, Liz, can you give your report? No. Does the committee have any questions on the report to date? I see. Okay, go ahead, Shirley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Liz, for your report. And I had one question for you, if I may. You mentioned that you felt we were getting somewhat close to potentially exploring some pilot projects. And I'm just wondering if you could delve into that a little bit more. Is that kind of based on the availability of lands, or on the needs within a certain community, or a combination of, or how would you choose one or two pilot projects?
Yeah, so I think, thank you very much for that question. So we're still kind of mapping that out. I think what we've realized is that as we've pulled together all of this information into the screening checklist and process map, that we'd like an opportunity to kind of ground truth that, and work through a couple of example sites to see if we've kind of captured the usual things that will pop up in that assessment, and have well ordered them. Our thought was it probably makes the most sense to take a look at county-owned lands for that potential assessment process, I guess, to get our feet wet and work through that. And then, you know, we could be looking to broaden out or ask the lower tier municipalities if there are lands that kind of jump out at them as perhaps low-hanging fruit that we might look to do an assessment of. I don't know that we'll necessarily, you know, take each of those pilot properties through the whole process to an RFP offering necessarily, but I think the idea is more or less to choose a few sites that will allow us to go through and do that ground truthing of our process and make sure that we've got the good framework. And we will choose sites, I think, that have some base potential that we think could work in theory, just so that we can kind of work through that process. I suppose we could end up in a situation where we find that one of those sites is a really good candidate, in which case, what a wonderful problem to have. And then we may want to kind of continue on with that towards an RFP process if appropriate. But I think one of the other key considerations there is really just trying to get our heads around what kind of budget might be involved for carrying out kind of that pre-development shovel-ready work. You know, if we could get a ballpark idea of those initial screening review processes, and, you know, certain things have to happen at certain points of the process for grant applications as well. So trying to kind of front load a little bit of that work into that pre-screening process, I think could make a lot of sense, so that when you do go out to RFP, you've got a really good potential project that someone could take on and then run with the grant applications right away. So yeah, so I think at this point we'll start with some county lands and see what we can kind of do process-wise, and then perhaps extend an invitation out to the municipalities if there's lands they might suggest as an option.
Thank you, Liz, for that. Is there any other questions from the committee? Mr. Warden, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Liz, thank you for the report. And listening to your report, it all sounds complicated, and I don't envy your job. I mean, and thank you as well for providing the link to Bruce County's 101. And it's actually, it's really, I shouldn't say actually, it's very good.
Yeah.
What I see there. You provided it. Is that to say, you know, here's a model? Are we looking at that? Are we looking to do something different? Or, you know, can you talk more about what they have done at Bruce County and what we might do?
Wonderful. And thank you, Warden. That's a beautiful segue to the presentation that I had prepared as well. So Tara, would that be something we could put up at this point in time, please? The PowerPoint? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Perfect. So in a long-winded answer to your question, Warden, I did put together a bit of a PowerPoint just to kind of display how other counties and regional municipalities are kind of sharing information and communicating with the public around their goals. And I think I've pulled 3 examples here, the County of Bruce being one of them. There are additional ones, and I can provide you with an additional website as well to take a look. Excuse me. But what I was thinking is, you know, there's some key elements within these 3 examples that I thought were kind of neat. And so I wanted to share them with the task force and get those creative juices flowing, because I think, you know, if you were to take a look at those and, you know, go to the sites, I've included the links on the presentation as well that will be shared. You know, play around and see if there's anything that really resonates with you. I'm absolutely open for input in terms of how we choose to present this information. And I think Rob and Olivia are also looking for some additional input in terms of which direction we might want to go with our communications approach. Excuse me. Okay, so the first one, this is the region of Waterloo. And so they've got this Building Better Futures is kind of the branding that goes along with their plan. And they've set a quite ambitious target of 2,500 new homes over the next 5 years. And they are wanting to really focus in around that affordability piece. So they are looking at going from an average of 50 units per year up to 500 units per year to reach that goal. And so that's a pretty significant scale up. So kudos to them, you know, make big plans for sure. But one of the things I thought was really neat about their site and their social media campaign that goes along with it is they have this really neat online dashboard. And so they've set a specific target, and then they're providing real-time information and tracking that and showing their progress around unit creation. And I thought that was kind of a neat option that we might want to consider. And there would be some data implications that would go with that we'd need to, you know, nail down all of the tracking and make sure we have good data sources to do that. But I think they always say you monitor what you care about, right? If you're tracking it, you're keeping it top of mind and you're looking at your progress and allowing you to kind of make shifts as you go. So foreseeably, if they got to year 2 and we're not at 1,000 units yet based on their 500 a year, you know, maybe they go back and need to pivot their approach or add more resources or that kind of thing. So I thought that was a neat way of sharing that information. So that was one of the examples that I had wanted to provide. Tara, could we advance that? Thank you. So the second one is Huron County, and they've got a housing renewal plan that they've established, and they've done quite a bit of public outreach and campaign around their work. So certainly, and I know it's a lot to take in here, I've taken kind of a scrapbook approach to the things that really jumped out at me. But what I thought was really interesting about their approach is that they really hammer in on that notion that the whole community benefits when we have adequate affordable housing. And so they're really trying to educate and engage residents to take an ownership role in supporting the creation of affordable housing. And so you can see here, be part of the solution, say yes. So it's all very kind of positive and engaging and trying to kind of get that message out that It's going to take all of us. It needs to be collaborative. We need to be kind of working with one mind towards this goal, and that there is a role for everybody to play in that process, even if it's a matter of, just supporting the applications that happen near you. So I thought that was a really, really neat approach. They also have they call it the Huron County Connects portal. And so on there, they have various different discussion topics, and you can kind of, while they're running an active discussion campaign, you can go onto the site and you can provide comments and you can read their primers, and it provides an opportunity for a little bit of asynchronous dialogue between the municipality and the public around the particular issue. And they link in all of the related resources and strategies and reports that go with that. So it's all in one place for the public to access and then have an opportunity to comment back, which I thought was really neat. And then just the final thing that I thought was quite interesting is they pulled together a whole series of little infographics. So similar to that square in the top right corner where it says be a part of the solution, they produced a whole bunch of those and they have them available for download on their website. So if somebody felt strongly about the issue, they could download one of the images and share it through their own social media as well. So it's not only initiated by the county in terms of getting those messages out, but individual stakeholders or partners can take that role on as well. Could we do the next slide, please? Okay, and just a little bit of additional information about housing in Huron County. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting and valuable about their approach is that they also talk about the need for the county to play an advocacy role in the creation of affordable housing. And so they've taken this compassionate lens around the idea that, the whole community benefits, and that this is a way of for each of us to act with compassion and love for our community, but that, that love and compassion and action aren't enough. As we know, right, we need those dollars and cents to align as well. And so right within their plan, they've talked about the necessity of advocating for appropriate funding from other levels of government as well to help do this unit creation. And so that's built right into their renewal plan, and their messaging as well is around this advocacy piece, which I thought was really neat. Also, just the tie in there to the fundamental right to housing. And so they've put that very front and center in their messaging as well. I think really just kind of setting the bar that this is something we do. We do it because it's important. We do it for the vulnerable people in our community. We do it for ourselves. And it's really kind of a community building exercise. So I really liked that approach. I thought that had a nice feel, and kind of ties in a lot of those issues together in a way that is accessible for people to kind of engage with the public or professionals. Tara, could you do the last ones here? Thank you. Okay, and then Warden, to your point, this is the Bruce County example. So they released their affordable housing guide and toolkit in May of this year. And that was associated with a social media campaign as well, where they shared links to the toolkit and press releases and that kind of thing around what they were doing. I think I really, really like the way that they've arranged this. I think they've done an excellent job of kind of pulling together the big picture for Bruce County, and they've provided this beautiful infographic here kind of showing those affordability thresholds and how that relates back to household income. They've included a leaderboard here, just kind of sharing a lot of their stats and how that has changed over recent times in terms of affordability, and then speaking a little bit to their core households in core need. And then if you see on the left-hand side, that's actually the menu from their website. So they've got some preliminary information. They talk about affordable housing 101. What are we doing here? What is the goal? They talk under the next drop downs around the housing landscape and kind of trying to set the scene and give some context for where, how this work is happening, why it's happening, who's involved, key stakeholders. Generally overall for the county, what the situation is, and then they nail down into each of the individual member municipalities and provide additional information about the specific context challenges, needs, and tools that are available in each of those member municipalities as well. And then round it out with kind of available funding programs and a glossary, which is good. So we always want to know what we're talking about, and sometimes those definitions can be pretty finicky. So I thought that was a beautiful example. The thing I really liked about this was that they did rely on a lot of that visual information. I think that's easily accessible to many people. And then the fact that they did dive down into that lower tier municipal level and trying to set the scene, because as we know, our communities do differ. We've got a beautiful variety of communities and characteristics and personalities. And so, the context is different from place to place. The tools are different, and the needs as well. And I think there's just maybe one more here. Right, thank you. So this one here, so this is an example of the detail for at the member municipality level. So for each member municipality, they provide a map to show, where are we located. They provide that overview of the municipal context, an infographic and dashboard for that specific municipality, a little bit of information about kind of their development process and, who to contact, what's the inroad. And then they list some of the active development tools and incentives for each of those municipalities. And again, like I said, they backed that up with a social media rollout as well. So there's some really great examples. Another one that I would mention, if you're interested, is Wellington County. So it's wellington.ca/live here is the website for that one. And one of the things I like about their approach is they also include community stories within their website. And so you can kind of click on different examples of folks who are experiencing difficulty accessing housing or homelessness as well, and try to kind of get an understanding of how that issue is actually affecting individuals within that specific community. The other thing that I absolutely love about that one, and in retrospect, I probably should have included it, but I just slipped my mind. They have a very matter-of-fact FAQ section. And so they actually list, there's a number of, theoretical resident questions like, I don't want to listen to construction happening, for example. What do I do? And the drop down is, well, housing is necessary. And the development department will work with that developer to ensure that they're respecting the noise bylaw and that kind of thing. So they really they don't mince words. I think they're quite matter of fact, and I feel that there's a place for that. Certainly it's an important issue. We really do need to be taking active action on it, and so being direct, I think, about what the needs are and what our tools are, and the fact that to a great degree, this is probably not a negotiable issue. It really is an important issue that we have to address. I really liked that element of their site. So a very long-winded answer to the warden's question there, but certainly there are a range of different approaches we could take. And I would be happy to discuss with any of you kind of the key elements that jumped out for you in that presentation, or other examples that you may have seen and elements that you really liked of those. We can certainly work with Rob and Olivia to start to integrate those elements into our plan and look at rolling that out as we go.
Thank you, Liz. It's just such a great pleasure to actually see somebody like yourself that's so bubbly and really enjoys your job.
Thank you.
Does the committee have any questions on these great examples and so on? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Shirley.
Thank you, Chair Burley, and I totally agree about Liz. There's just a question, and I really appreciate that you shared those examples of what's happening in other communities. And I'm wondering, and I love seeing all of the comments related to the NIMBYism and how they're addressed in the FAQs. I think that's great. But I'm wondering, do we have any insight into the buy-in? You'll be pulling information, of course, from their websites and so on, but I'm wondering, have you actually had communication with any of those communities to find out, is it really working?
Yes. Thank you. A wonderful question as well. So I did, as part of the project, I have been carrying out, kind of informal networking chats with others who are working in a similar space. And so Scott was really wonderful. He set me up with Denise at Huron County, who is, I think she's their senior planner working on housing matters. And so we had an opportunity to discuss the rollout of their plan. And so they've been working, they've actually gone to the point where they have selected a number of sites and have been working and have engaged an architect actually to work with them with designs for their key sites. And then those will be made available through the RFP process. So they're a few steps ahead of us in terms of that. And Denise has been wonderful and has kind of given an open invitation for us to loop back and see how that process is going. And we've had some preliminary discussion about, maybe there's an opportunity for us to do some kind of collaborative report or paper article for a journal or something along those lines to try and kind of pull together how their approach has been going and then, how we're trying to kind of shape our approach and how those might differ. And maybe there's an opportunity to kind of compare and contrast with that. But it does seem like they've got quite a bit of interest from the development community and have moved on to that design stage for a number of their sites. So the progress is happening. I don't think it's happening as fast as any of us want it to. But yes, it's seems to be getting some traction in Huron County anyhow.
Thank you, Liz. Shirley, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Does the committee have any other questions at this time? Warden, please go ahead.
Thank you. I talk about complicated, but I say complicated because I think the job that we have is to make it not complicated. And I'm not a developer, I'm not a builder, but if I were a developer or a builder, what would I love to see? If I went to the website, what would wow me? What would I need to see that says, oh my gosh, they've done a quarter of the work for us already? I mean, I don't know, but my questions are all answered. Here are the resources that I can go to. It's almost like a systems navigator when we talk about that in social services. Almost like having the same sort of thing, the tools, everything is at my hand. In other words, gosh, I have to go here because they're going to make life, it's welcoming. It's, this is where I need to go and build. And even for homeowners who might be thinking about, geez, can I, build an accessory unit or can I, make units, my basement or whatever it may be. Holy cow, there's a section here for me. And oh, I didn't know that. Wow, that's all laid out. It's almost like laying it out. So simplifying it. And part of what that does is it communicates to these people how you do it. But I think it also communicates to the greater public that this is a priority for us. And it's a communications piece about we're taking some real action here. And they can actually go there and see the things that we're doing. I love the reporting piece, which talks about here's where we were at this date. And here's where we're planning to be, and here's where we are in the interim. I really love those pieces. So I'm excited about what I see here, to be quite frank. But as I hear the thing get presented, I always go back to thinking, it sounds complicated. And anytime it sounds complicated, it's almost like, oh, like it's bigger than us. But anyways, it's a real, I think, skill for people to be able to bring it down to something like that. It's very consumable for people and useful and holds us to account as well, because we said we were going to do this back here, and where are we now, right?
Exactly.
Great comments, Mr. Warden. And I agree, as a contractor, it gets me excited too that maybe I'll start building affordable housing. Does the committee have any other questions? The staff have any questions? I have two planners and Director of Housing and CAO. Any comments? Kim, please go ahead. I think I've seen your hand. You're muted.
Scott has his hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Thanks, Mr. Chair and members of the task force. Yeah, just to build on the warden's last comments there, one of the things that I think Liz and Becky have done a great job at is breaking this down into manageable pieces. And one of the things that we're continuing to talk with our communication staff on is sort of the different audiences that we're communicating here to. So if we're communicating the opportunity out to not-for-profits or developers, how do we clearly show them that to put it in other terms, we've removed as many hurdles as possible and there's certainty in the development and approvals process, versus, to Councillor Keaveney's earlier points, if we're communicating to neighbors or people that might have apprehension or fear or even NIMBYism about this, how do we break that down? And Liz shared some great examples from other communities, and we continue to dialogue with our neighbors and other planning and housing departments across the province to find out what's worked for others and what hasn't. And I don't think it's any surprise we haven't found any community yet that successfully conquered NIMBYism, but I think through the approaches and the wonderful work that Liz and others are doing, we've got a more firm footing for those different layers of communication.
Thank you, Scott.
I will add now, if I may, Mr. Chair. I'm really appreciative of the work done and the work yet to come between Liz and Anne Marie and the whole team when it comes to the financial aspects of this. We can lay all the groundwork in the world, but if the money doesn't work, the builds will not happen. And I think until we all have a really deep and detailed understanding of what it takes to bring a project off and what it's like to have to go through the CMHC processes, Anne Marie's kind and only tells me enough that I can bear without running from the room. There's a lot. And if we're going to be able to make these programs work, it's not different than the way that we approach economic development, in my opinion, which is that many hands will need to be held and, a lot of work here, because those private developers, they have neither the time, the patience, or anything else to go through all of that. So if we're going to rely on those programs to make these projects go, we're going to have to do the heavy lifting. And I don't even understand enough about it to be able to say that we have the right resources in-house to be able to make that happen right now.
Thank you, Kim. Good point. Please go ahead, Brian.
I think I've asked this before. I'll ask it again. I always worry about the prioritizing our projects. Do we do a good enough job of spreading the love? I know it's easy to say that the need for affordable housing is mostly in, like, the numbers are high in Hanover and Owen Sound, and that's where a lot of the money goes to. But do we spread it around, or how do we balance? It's got to be a tough balance. How do we spread that?
Who wants to try to answer that? Please go ahead, Anne Marie.
I can try. I think that because we have so limited resources right now, we're putting them where our best projects are, or our best success for projects are, or opportunities that present themselves. For instance, the Durham build. It just happened to be a piece of land that we were able to segregate. There was a willing and great partner to work with that recognized the need for affordable housing. So it made sense. So I think those are the win-win situations that we're looking for right now. And that's sort of dictating where we're building, quite honestly, along with need, obviously. But right now, it's the low-lying fruit. The resources that we have are so small compared to the need that we have to make sure that we're getting bang for our buck.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the committee? I can't see no hands up on my screen unless I'm missing it. If not, I'll ask for a show of hands approval of the motion before us. The motion, I believe, is opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you, Liz, for a great presentation today. Look forward to your next one. So I'm going to move on with our agenda here today. I'm going to start off with our recommendation is that HDRAF 1322 Lutheran Social Services Affordable Housing Build. That staff report HR AF 1322 regarding delivered social services affordable housing bill be received, and that a monthly subsidy be provided to Lutheran Social Services Owen Sound to supplement operating costs for the new affordable bill, and that the funds for the operating subsidy come from the existing nonprofit housing bill budget. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Mr. Warden, second by Councillor Keaveney. And I don't, my screen is all up. I do not know who is going to take this one on.
It's me, Mr. Chair. Anne
Okay,
Marie.
go.
Thank you. So when I wrote this 3 weeks ago, things have changed since. Lutheran Social Services are working through the co-investment fund with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Due to increasing interest rates and increasing construction costs, it is getting harder and harder to make a build viable. And I know, considering the report we just had and all that we want to do, this is a good experience for us. It's good for us to go through this process in order to learn what is really, really viable. With this build, they do have an $18 million project with $4.7 million going towards it, and the need of a $13.5 million mortgage. At this point, in working with CMHC has a very small risk tolerance when it comes to interest rates, when it comes to borrowing. In order to make this project work, there needs to be either more funding up front or an ongoing subsidy. At the time when I wrote this, we were still in the stages of working with CMHC. Since interest rates have gone up and another cost estimate came in for the build, they're now looking at about an operating budget of $300,000 a year required in order to make this work, which is not viable. Over a 50-year mortgage period, that's as much as the build itself. So that's definitely not, CMHC co-investment fund right now is not looking like an option for this project. In saying that, there's some things that we can do to work with the nonprofits still. I did get some information on builds that are happening right now and what their costs are per square foot. The three that came in were anywhere between $310 a square foot to $325. They're basing this on about $355. So I think there's some room that we could work with the architect to see if we could get that scale down. We could get another cost estimate done from a second party. Those are some of the options we could look at the build and design itself. The other thing is we could look at, are there other funds? Would it make sense to put more funds in up front? Can we get it to a point where the subsidy, a smaller subsidy, is going to work? To me, $80,000 a month to house 20 people ongoing makes sense. $300,000 over the lifetime of this does not make sense or isn't viable in my mind. The other thing is where the funding would be coming from is the fact that their mortgage for their current RGI project is due or is done in 2023. The province has just come out with a guideline of what we have to do now in order to sustain and keep that social housing in our portfolio. We have to enter into negotiations with each of our 9 nonprofits when their mortgage expires into an agreement that will help sustain them for all their capital needs, their operating needs for the future, and also help develop more affordable housing. So if there's any money left over once we do that, it remains in the housing system. So if we're taking that big of a chunk out of that, I'm unable to do all of that with that. So I'm asking right now that this report, instead of being the recommendation that I have, is that it is just received for information, and that I will continue to work with the nonprofit and see if there are any options that we can do in order to make this build viable. I do want to mention also that there is a contribution grant that CMHA has come out with, but you can't stack both both of the programs. So there is some work going on at our service manager sector level, working with CMHC to talk about being able to stack these two programs because it's needed. If going through the co-investment fund requires so much more money up front to make it work, then this is a good way to do that. So we're kind of hoping that we might be able to, at some point in the future, stack those two programs. The other thing too is just working with interest rates. Is there a way to freeze or to have an interest rate that is lower for someone it's building affordable housing, especially a nonprofit, because we know that the interest rates are likely to go up again, and this is creating an issue. This is not just for us. This is a number of projects around the province that are in the same situation as we were maybe a year ago. The project might have been viable when we didn't have such higher construction costs and interest rates. So certainly something that we need to work on. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Before I open the floor up to questions, Tara, do we need to revise the motion?
The committee could go through the formal amendment process, but another option might be the mover and seconder withdraw, and you can put a new one forward to receive for information and take no action at this time.
Okay, what would the committee like to do? The mover was, I do not have it in front of me.
Warden.
Mr. Warden,
Hicks
do you wish to
and Councillor
remove the
Keating.
motion?
Yeah, I could simply withdraw and then make a new motion that we just go with number 1.
Just to receive for information.
Yeah,
And the seconder agree with that?
It's Councillor Keating.
Shirley?
Yes.
Okay, so be it, that's what we'll do. Do we need to vote on that, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Okay, a show of
Sorry,
hands.
you need to vote on the final motion to receive
Okay.
for information.
Okay, now I'll open the floor up to questions of the committee. Brian, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Anne Marie, does the social services, Lutheran Social Services, know that you're changing this? Okay, because I already received a phone call, really hoping this was going to get passed, and I didn't know this was going to happen. So, but so they know what's going on. Like, we're communicating and.
Yes, they do. I did talk to them, and I am going to have a meeting with them, future meetings with them to try and make this go. But at this point, what I'm asking for, $8,000 in subsidy, isn't going to make it viable. So there's no sense in me us agreeing to this because it doesn't make the project go.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that there's transparency here. That's
Definitely.
all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Is there any other questions from the committee? And I gotta apologize. I'm at George and West's office. I thought we had great internet, so mine keeps cutting in and out, so it mustn't be me, it must be the internet. Is there no other questions?
I don't see anyone's hand.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask for a show of hands to vote on a motion to accept this for information. Opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you, Anne Marie. So I'm going to move on to the agenda. Our next item on our agenda is request for the 14th Street Housing Project. I'll read the motion. The staff report HDRAF 1422 regarding an update to the request for tender for the 14th Street renovation to be received for information. Someone to move to put on the floor. Moved by Brian, second by Shirley. And that update is coming from Anne Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just providing you an update of where we're at with our 14th Street renovation, and that our request for tender is ready to go for next week. We have been working with Alan Avis Architects, and they have provided us with a Class C estimate and a probable construction cost. And I think Tara is going to put up my report for me so that we can have a look at it. So I do have Aaron Whitney we do have Aaron Whitney with us today if there's any questions. But so far they have provided us with an elevation of what this is going to look like. We have, if we want to just go down to what the next one. So I don't know if everyone can see this, but there are 12 units. There are, each of the units is a bachelor type unit. So there is one room, there is a kitchenette for each of them. There will be their own washer and dryer in the unit, and they are open concept. So there is some universal design there for accessibility. If we go down to the bottom, or sorry, to the middle, you'll notice that there is a common room area in the middle for people. And that is for use of the 12 tenants. There are a number of offices on site. So this site will also hold a number of staff. So there will be staffing there. We're working with Canadian Mental Health Association to come up with a model of care, and that will determine the amount of staffing that will be on site. There's also we're going to run our homelessness programs out of this area too. So it would be our case managers. So likely there would be staff during the day there. And then hopefully we would be able to, staff in the evenings and possibly overnight if required, depending on the level of care or the programs. We have a hubs programs room, so that there's going to be a little kitchen off to the side, so there could be some meal programming. People can also do meals within. That could be used by community partners for rentals. There is storage areas. There's a reception corridor meeting rooms that can be all sectioned off away from the residence area so that there wouldn't be any concerns. And you'll note we've made 2 units accessible on the lower corridor here. And the reason we did that is for funding. A lot of the funding applications that we've been looking into do require a certain percentage of accessibility in order to qualify for the funds. So we have changed that. And Aaron, I'm not sure if you have anything you'd like to add about the drawings.
Aaron, please go ahead.
Yep, I'll just give an update on the mechanical. We are looking at using air source heat pumps for all of the individual units themselves. So those will help with our greenhouse gas emissions. There'll be 2 existing rooftop units reused to heat the corridors. As Anne-Marie said, we have got those barrier-free units in there as well to get that extra funding. And that's really all I have is up to date for energy. And there will be a generator for battery for backup for the whole entire building, basically.
Thank you, Aaron. I just curious, either Anne-Marie or Aaron, does this particular project go through the accessibility committee before it's put out?
I don't think we did, but we did talk with Kathy. We could certainly bring it to the committee. We have worked with the peer group from CMHA around the programming and the design of it, the peer support group, but that's certainly a great idea. Dwight, we could certainly put it on their next agenda.
No, it's just that we tend to get a lot of, I sit on that committee.
Yes.
We do get a lot of projects coming in, and I think we as a county should maybe do the same.
Sure, certainly we could do that. We're actually, proud to say that we're over what we need for what's required for accessibility, but I think it'll be well needed for this use.
Sorry, have you given thought to the design outside, like sidewalks and stuff like that? That's probably all done, or?
So we had to go through site plan approval with this city. It's with this city right now. They gave us our recommendations. We gave that over to the architect, and that's all included in the drawings on the site plan and landscape plans.
Okay, thank you, because that's where some questions could come from the accessibility committee, for instance, access in the building, stuff like that. Okay. Any questions from the committee? And again, over there. Shirley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a question, Anne Marie, if I may, thinking of the last report and the suggestion of, as we know, our higher interest rates and construction costs and the potential of that project not being currently viable, what has the impact been on this project on 14th Street? So I must say I'm delighted to see it moving forward.
We were lucky that we did receive almost $2 million from the province through the Social Services Relief Fund. So that money upfront will allow us, that also goes towards helping to purchase the building and will help. I think that with the interest costs right now, we have a number of options in-house too that we can work with finance in order to either self-finance or look at a mortgage, depending on where we're at. We can work with Infrastructure Ontario for better interest rates. So I think because it's a renovation and not an actual new build and the cost is not quite as large, that we should be fine. Also looking at some funding, there is a bit more funding that has come out. I did mention the contribution grant from the National Housing Strategy from CMHC is available. So we could get up to $20,000 per unit because it is transitional also. So there's some extra funding there. And we also are applying through the seed funding for up to $150,000 for soft costs. So I think between the layering, the stacking, as we've talked about before, of all of those funds, that we should be able to make this project viable. It is going to be viable, and we will be able to provide a subsidy. Again, because the people that we are serving, it will be people on ODSP or OW. So we know that there will be an ongoing subsidy similar to any of our rent geared to income projects in order to assist with the operating costs.
Great
Thank
news.
you.
Great to hear that, Anne Marie.
Yes.
Shirley, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Mr. Burley. Thank you.
Anne Marie, is there any grants available for the furnishing of the project?
None that I'm aware of, but I'm wondering if we could, we do have some funds that we could use through our sustainable housing benefit for beds. And we have worked with Habitat for Humanity and is it Missions for Bibles for Missions in the past with some of our other transitional units. So we're usually able to furnish. And through the program that we're running through Sustainable Housing Benefit, if anyone does move on into their own place, they take their bed with them, and then we would replace the bed.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you. Does the committee have any questions on this great project? And Tara, I do not see any hands.
No, I don't either.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion. Then all those in favor of the motion, show of hands, please. Opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you, Anne Marie.
Thank you.
Moving on for agenda, we're down to other business. Do we have any other business here today? Before I adjourn the meeting, I haven't heard from Randy Schwarzer. Randy, any comments from you?
Just just to hear about the updates on the exciting projects that's happening. We all know that these are well needed in our communities, and so just kudos to Liz and Anne-Marie and Aaron and Scott and everyone that's worked on these projects. Yeah, great success to be able to move these forward. I know that Anne-Marie will work with Lutheran Services too to just hopefully get that project viable too, because as we all know, we need these units in our communities for sure.
Thank you, Randy. Scott was so excited about it. He gave us a preview of the slide presentation yesterday at County Council.
That was me. I was so excited about it.
Okay, our next meeting date, I do not have my book in front of me, Tara. Do you have the next meeting date?
That was going to be determined. So I'll be in touch with potential dates we can look at.
Okay, and it'd be nice to be able to have the meetings in person for a change, but I guess that'll sort itself out. So we have no other business here today. I'll ask for adjournment of our meeting then, please. So moved by Shirley, second by Brian,
Sure.
that we now adjourn. So thanks, everybody. We're now adjourned.